Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. As usual, loaded slate of hoops. Unfortunately, there were a lot of blowouts, which it feels like we haven't gotten a ton of so far this season, so I guess they were just all being saved for today. So I will talk about every game at least a little bit, but we're not going to go super in detail for most of them. However, there's one team that I've been meaning to talk about. I've mentioned them in a couple of these videos that has been rolling so far, and with a win today, now has the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. So let's go ahead and get into it. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And as always, drop me your biggest takeaways from these games down below in the comments. As you probably guessed by now, we're going to focus a majority of this video on the Sixers-Celtics game. This was one that was very anticipated. The Sixers and Celtics both came into this one with just a single loss, fighting for the top spot in the Eastern Conference. The winner of this game would have sole possession of number 1 in the East. And obviously, that doesn't matter too much here on November 9th. But it's still interesting at this point. The Celtics have been widely considered the best team in the East up until this point, while the Sixers have very quietly, after losing their first game, won 5 straight with Embiid playing well, Maxey, role players stepping up. Of course, they made the big James Harden trade, and some of their acquisitions have been looking good. And this was a chance for them to go ahead and say, hey, we're not just a fun team, we're a team that could actually give other top teams in the Eastern Conference some real problems. And in this game, they did exactly that. The Celtics start off kind of hot, but then the Sixers led for the entire second half, never giving up the lead. Now, they almost did choke towards the end. They were up by, I think, 14 with a couple minutes to go, and all of a sudden had some bad turnovers, some really bad isolation possessions, just kind of got away from what got them to that point. It was also just some great shot making and defensive play from the Celtics, who are incredibly talented, and Porzingis had a 3-point attempt to try and tie this game and send it to overtime really late, but he misses. Embiid goes ahead, grabs the rebound. The Sixers close this one out, defeating the Boston Celtics in a really solid effort. Outside of those final minutes, they clearly look like the better team for a majority of this game, and now with the win, they're 6-1, sitting with, like I said earlier, sole possession of the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, the only team to have a single loss in the season outside of the reigning champion Denver Nuggets. And it's been by a combination of efforts. Joel Embiid is currently playing again like an MVP. In this game, he puts up 27 points, 10 boards, 4 assists, 1 steal, and 4 blocks on 50% shooting, including a huge shot right at the end of this game to slow the bleeding down and ultimately help the Sixers get to the finish line. Very MVP type shot, like we saw a lot from him last year when he was trying to fight for Clutch Player of the Year. He's also been playing out of his mind defensively. He's looked unstoppable on that end. Coach Nick Nurse, who we're going to talk a lot about in a little bit, has really asked Embiid to be more aggressive on that end, gotten him to buy in and say, hey, I can be a DPOY type player. This is the most engaged and effective I've seen Embiid on defense in a long time, and he's doing this in the first few games of the season, which is great to see that he's not, waiting till the end of the year. He's making this push early, and it set a tone for the rest of the Sixers, because when he's defending like this, the rest of the team seemingly steps their game up too. Tyrese Maxey hasn't been great defensively, but I've loved a lot of his screen navigation. He's fighting through them a lot more. He's trying out there, which is really all you can ask for. And in this game offensively, he continues to play like an all-star, putting up 25 points, 9 boards, and 5 assists. Like a lot of his playmaking, him and Embiid's 2-man game has been lethal out there. Pick and roll, pick and pop, just operating off ball, on ball. Maxey is a true offensive weapon, and he and Embiid are showcasing a lot of the chemistry that they've built up over years together. Kelly Oubre is playing like one of the steals of the offseason. Last year, he averaged over 20 points per game, but it was on really rough efficiency on a bad Hornets team. This time, he's doing similar stuff, but on good efficiency on one of the best teams in the league so far. He's been a steal of a role player that got him on a minimum contract after basically no other team wanted him, and he's been the athletic shot-making wing that the Sixers have really been looking for a long time. He's a perfect fit for this team and has excelled ever since being moved to the starting lineup post-James Harden trade. Meanwhile, Tobias Harris is playing some of his best basketball in years, finally being slided back over to the 4 where he seems a lot more comfortable. Paul Reed, I've really liked what he's brought to the table as a backup big. Their new additions, Nick Batum has been playing great so far. The Sixers are utilizing him in a lot of different ways. He's knocking down threes. Robert Covington, same thing, playing solid defensively. The team just feels well-rounded. They're deep. Their stars are playing well. They're cohesive. They look like a team that has the ability to go out there and compete with anybody on any given night. I've been extremely impressed with them so far, and they're kind of pulling me in again. I'm sorry. I know. I always manage to find myself getting pulled back into the Sixers. I don't know what it is, but every year I'm like, okay, maybe this is the season they put it together. And I still think they could probably use a third star alongside Maxey and Embiid to truly make this thing work the best way possible. I don't know if they're able to beat a team like a Boston in a 7-game series as currently constructed, or even in Milwaukee if they put things together. But they do feel like firmly the third best team in the Eastern Conference right now. And a lot of that has to go to Nick Nurse. He has been a revelation for this team. If you want proof that coaching matters in the NBA, go back and watch the Sixers from last year under Doc Rivers and watch them now, because it feels like a completely different basketball team despite being centered around the same stars. Obviously, James Harden is gone now, but Embiid's still here, Maxey's still here, Tobias Harris, 3 of their top 4 players from last year are still here, and the team still feels drastically different. Nick Nurse has them moving a lot more, both in terms of player movement and the ball. Embiid is being used a lot more as an offensive hub. He's getting the ball in post-up scenarios, and guys are moving around him. They're cutting, they're running off screens, getting open for 3-point shots. It's not just give Embiid the ball and stand around like it felt like we saw a lot of times last year under Doc Rivers, where under him it really just felt like the Sixers were trying to brute force their way through a lot of games with talent, which they've got a lot of. They've got the MVP, they had Harden, who was pretty solid last year, Tyrese Maxey, a rising star, Tobias Harris. Like, they were a talented team, but it didn't feel like they were very often out scheming teams. Now under Nick Nurse, it feels like that's exactly what's being done. Embiid's playmaking has shined a lot more. He's playing efficient. He's playing some of the best defense of his entire career. Same thing with the rest of the team. He's got them to buy in defensively. I like the switch up he makes. He actually seems to make adjustments, which I feel like we didn't see a lot from the Sixers last year. Outside of this final stretch of the game, they've been executing at a high level pretty much the entire season. I like the confidence that he's instilling in Maxey, letting him know that, hey, we see you as the second star. Go out there and be aggressive. I think it was against the Wizards, or one of the past few games that they played in, where Maxey didn't have the best first half, and the second half really turned up, and he said bluntly at the press conference that we need more from Maxey. We see him as one of our stars. He's got to be better, more aggressive, like he was in the second half, in the first half. I like that. I like that he's pushing these guys to be better, to be the best version of themselves, and we're seeing Maxey do exactly that. He's taking that next step, and I think this system that Nick Nurse has put into place has helped both him and Embiid and really the rest of this team a lot. He's got guys in the best possible spot to succeed. Tobias Harris is actually involved in the offense now, rather than just most of the time standing in the corner. And this has led to the Sixers having the 5th best offense and the 5th best defense, with the 2nd best net rating in the league so far. They've been elite on both ends of the ball. They're beating teams that are really good. The only loss they have is to a Bucks team that has Dame and Giannis. And sure, they haven't been the best so far, but they've been good. I truly believe that if you put these Sixers under Doc Rivers in the same game, they probably would have folded at the end of this game, and the Celtics would have won. They would have gone ahead, either hit that 3 to send it to overtime, or taken the lead in regulation, and the Sixers would have had nothing but, I guess, kind of a moral victory of like, hey, we had really good play for most of the second half, we just collapsed at the end. Instead, they get the win, they move to the top seed in the Eastern Conference, and look like not just one of the best teams in the East, but one of the best teams in general. Embiid playing like an MVP and DPOY, Maxey looking like an all-star, Tobias Harris playing some of the best hoops of his career, Kelly Oubre doing the same thing. They've got wings, they've got depth now, they've got guys who are defending, shooting. This is just a really well-rounded team that's operating under a coach that knows how to utilize these pieces. It has truly been a breath of fresh air watching these Sixers. I'm having way more fun watching them now than I did really the last few seasons under Doc Rivers. It's been extremely impressive what Nurse has done with this team, how these guys have responded to that, and I'm excited to continue to watch this Sixers team. I don't know what the rest of the season has in store for them. Of course, no matter what I say about here, it's not going to matter until we see them in a playoff scenario where they've, of course, had most of their demons. We've seen them succeed in the regular season. It's now a question of can they do it in the playoffs? And this team, at the moment, feels more well-built for those types of scenarios than the teams we've seen over the past few years. I don't know what it is. I just believe that they'll be more resilient. I like their talent. It feels more well-rounded. It feels like they have an actual scheme to consistently go back to, rather than, like I mentioned earlier, just trying to brute force through teams utilizing their talent, which worked at times, except for when they needed it to get to the conference finals. Meanwhile, for the Celtics, after starting the season 5-0, this is their second straight loss. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown struggled in this one, combined for just 27 points. The Sixers defense was a big part of that. Those two guys tried to bring him back at the end, but just weren't able to. There was also quite a few points in this game where Tatum just seemed to stop being aggressive. He would get the ball and look to pass it rather than attack. I don't know if he was just frustrated by the defense or if he was trying to get more guys involved, but they need Tatum as their best player to be a bit more aggressive in those moments. Derek White also shot just 6 of 18 in this one. He's been one of their better offensive options. It was just a game between two really good teams. I'm not worried about the Celtics despite losing 2 straight. Still think they're the best team in the Eastern Conference at this point. They just lost to a couple of good teams in the Sixers and the Wolves. Moving to some of the other games, as seems to be tradition here on the channel, I'll talk about the Thunder in the second game. OKC gets a win, moving to 5-3 after beating the Cavs for the second time this season. And a large part of that was, no surprise, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who had his best game of the season with 43 points, coming just 1 away from tying his career high, 2 points away from breaking it. He always seems to do that where he gets close and just can't do it for like a few years or so. Maybe he'll get there at some point this season, but 43 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block on 69% shooting. The Cavs couldn't guard him. It didn't matter if it was Donovan Mitchell, if it was Caris LeVert, if it was someone bigger, if it was Garland, who he was continuously going at whenever he got that mismatch. He was torching everybody, whether he was finishing around the rim, hitting tough mid-range buckets, huge step-back 3 later on in this game to stop the bleeding after the Cavs went a little bit of a run. He was incredible, still playing incredible all-NBA caliber basketball. His playmaking feels like it's taken a jump. The defense feels better than ever. Shai is at the peak of his powers, and as he continues to build momentum, I think an MVP case is going to continuously build for Shai, especially if the Thunder keep up the way they've been playing in these recent games. Chet, meanwhile, was great facing off against the double bigs of Allen and Mobley. He had 15 points, 7 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 3 blocks on 70% shooting. I can't say enough positive things about Chet. There might be a full video breaking him down at some point soon. In my opinion, he's been the rookie of the year so far, highly efficient, incredible defensively, a game changer for this team with his spacing, his ability to attack off the dribble against slower footed bigs, hit Allen with this ridiculous Dirk-esque move in this game as well. Chet's just incredibly special. And speaking of special rookies, Cason Wallace has also been so good for us. 14 points, 3 assists, or 3 rebounds, 2 assists on 71% shooting. Great defense. Playing the final few minutes of the game over Josh Giddey due to his defense, due to his shooting. Cason Wallace earned those minutes at the end of this game. He just never seems to make a mistake despite just turning 20 years old a few days ago. As for the Cavs, the backcourt struggled in this one. Garland had 15 and 9 assists, but 8 turnovers, really struggling to go up against the many great defenders that are on this roster at the guard spot like Shai, Dort, Cason Wallace also giving him some problems too. Donovan Mitchell, after torching his last game, was slowed down a lot more by Lou in this one, just 20 points and 8 of 23 shooting. Caris LeVert was the real menace, had 29 points, 5 boards, 5 dimes, relentless, continuously attacking, got to the line more times than I could count, and that was a big form of offense for them. They needed somebody to be aggressive and continuously put points up when they were struggling to shoot, and LeVert was the guy to do so. Next, let's move into Bucks Pistons. First thing I want to talk about is the ejection of Giannis in this one. For those of you that didn't see, with about 9 minutes left in the third, Giannis goes ahead and gets ejected. He got 1 technical in the first half for talking to the referee. They end up teeing him up, and then the second half, start of the third quarter, he dunks on Isaiah Stewart, and all he really did was stare at him for a little bit, gets a second tech, and they eject him from this game, which is ridiculous. The technical fouls have been really inconsistent and bad all throughout this year. There have been a number of technical fouls for guys hanging on the rim for even a moment. A lot of the times it's because they don't want to fall on someone under the rim, but they're still getting a tech. I've seen that in a variety of games so far, which is ridiculous. So I don't know why that's something they're enforcing. A few days ago with the Thunder playing the Warriors, Draymond Green was berating a ref for a while and didn't get any T. Well, meanwhile, Giannis, again, in this scenario, goes ahead and gets one for just kind of staring a guy down. I don't know. It's inconsistent. I feel like some guys have really short leashes. Some actions are like automatic techs. And meanwhile, there's other players or other instances where they just don't go ahead and pull the trigger. I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Giannis gets ejected, and that goes ahead and sparks a huge Pistons run. They end up taking the lead, push it to, I think, about 10 halfway through the fourth quarter, and it seemed like they might go ahead and steal this one, but instead, Damian Lillard comes in, saves the day, 18 points on 6 of 11 shooting in the fourth. Brook Lopez, big plays down the stretch. He had a huge 3 and a block on Cade Cunningham down low with about 12 seconds left to save this game. They go ahead and get this win. As usual, it's not pretty, but a win's a win. They continue to find ways to stack things up, even though the pieces are still clearly trying to gel. The Pistons, meanwhile, lose another close game. They're in a lot of these, but their execution's just bad down the stretch. A lot of caustic turnovers and mistakes, which is to be expected for a younger team. Cade Cunningham has 33 points, 8 boards, and 8 assists. Just 41% shooting. Not the most efficient game, but he had a big 3 late and really did keep them in this one offensively. He did have 5 turnovers and is averaging right around 6 per game on the season. Needs to be better in that regard for sure. That's the next step for him, is to just take care of the ball, because a lot of those turnovers are coming in those costly scenarios I was talking about earlier. That is losing them some of these closer games. Marcus Sasser, meanwhile, has looked like an all-rookie team caliber player so far. 26 points, 6 boards, 2 assists on 65% shooting. He's been amazing for that. Next, we had Nuggets versus Warriors, a battle of 2 of the top teams in the West so far, with the Nuggets coming out on top despite Jokic being really uncharacteristically not clutch down the stretch. He had a really bad turnover that led to a Steph 3, and then missed 2 back-to-back free throws, going 0 for in a free throw possession, which is very unlike Jokic. That left it as a 2-point game. The Warriors had a chance to tie this one. Steph Curry got a really good look at a layup, really similar to the game-winning shot that he hit against Oklahoma City a few days ago, but he ends up missing. The Warriors lose this one. I don't like how little Steph had the ball in his hands down the stretch. It feels like he was hardly touching it in the final minutes outside of those final 2 shots. Wiggins continues to struggle really badly for this team, has not found a flow at all. They need a lot more from him on both ends of the ball. Jokic, despite that rough end to the game, does finish this one with 35 points, 13 boards, 5 assists, and 3 blocks, shooting 57%. So typical Jokic, ridiculous game. But probably bigger news is Jamal Murray is out for the rest of the month with that injury he's been dealing with, if not maybe a little bit longer. It's a big blow to the Nuggets, but Jokic is great. They still got some pretty solid depth. They should be able to stay afloat, but it's something to keep an eye on, as again, he's out for 20 some days. Final game I'm going to go into in depth, because this video is getting pretty long, is Clippers versus Nets. This was the Clippers' chance to go ahead and bounce back from their first game with Harden, where they got blown up by the Knicks, and they were facing a pretty battered Nets team. They were without 3 starters in Ben Simmons, Cam Johnson, and Nick Claxton. And also, Cam Thomas didn't play a majority of the second half. I don't think any of the second half, with an ankle injury. Dorian Finney-Smith was out there starting at the center spot. They were depleted. This was a great chance for the Clippers to go ahead, get a win here, and build some momentum, and instead, they lose again. Again, faltering a lot offensively. They don't eclipse 100 points for the second straight game, when before Harden got there, every single game, they'd put up 118 points or more. The offense has just looked incredibly disjointed so far. It's a lot of dribbling. It's a lot of being afraid to step on the other guy's toes. Very weird shot distributions. Russ shot way more than he probably should in this one compared to Kawhi, Paul George, and even James Harden. And that's all stuff I think that they're going to figure out. They're going to have to level it out. I'm not worried about this or anything, but it's been very ugly to go ahead and start things off. Meanwhile, I worry about their lack of size after trading 3 front court pieces. Zubats has not been very good this season. He really struggles with his hands. The playmaking's not really there. At times he fumbles the ball a lot, loses it. I feel like they could use a different center for this team. I wouldn't be surprised if a trade comes. They're also without Mason Plumlee, who got hurt last game, so that's even less size. PJ Tucker's trying to do stuff out there, and he's like 40 years old. I don't know. It's just been a mess so far in this beginning of the Clippers James Harden era. Again, I think it'll be fine eventually, but so far has been pretty rough. Shout out to the Nets getting this win despite being depleted, and probably a lot of people expecting a Clippers bounce back win and maybe even a blowout. To wrap things up, let's go ahead and rapid fire these final games. The Suns beat the Bulls in Bradley Beal's Phoenix debut, where he did struggle, just 13 points on 3 of 12 shooting, but Kevin Durant was really good, 25, 7, and 8. Nurkic had maybe his best game as a Sun with 20 points, 17 boards, and 8 dimes, including the bucket to go ahead and put them over the top. DeMar DeRozan had a chance at the buzzer to hit a shot, but ultimately missed. The Bulls just really need to go ahead and blow this thing up. I don't know how much more proof they need. Shout out to Alex Caruso, who clamped up Kevin Durant on a final shot to win it in regulation. If the Bulls do decide to blow it up, he's going to be a big-time trade target for a lot of teams. The Kings and Blazers also go to overtime. Really disgusting game over there. Both teams dealing with some injuries. Sabonis leads the Kings to victory with a 27-11-9 game on 79% shooting. Did kind of get torched by DeAndre Ayton middies in the fourth quarter, but did enough to get them the win. I have been encouraged by DeAndre Ayton's play. 18-10, he was aggressive. Jeremy Grant has been scoring a lot for them with these injuries. Put up 38 points in this one, tried to will them to victory. Alongside Skylar Mays, shout out to him, 18 points and 11 dimes. Interviewed him once, super cool, been rooting for him. He was good in this one, had a three to go ahead and try and win this one in regulation, but ends up missing in the Blazers fall. Like I said, dealing with a lot of injuries. The Kings, meanwhile, really need De'Aaron Fox back at some point soon. He just makes everything work for this team. The Pacers drop another 130 plus point game. It feels like this offense is going to continue to play at a historic level the entirety of the season. Tyrese was great play from Miles Turner. This is just a overall really talented squad. Also, Jalen Smith is leading the NBA in three-point percentage, which is an amazing stat. But the Jazz lose this one, fall to 2-7. Been a rough start after last year. They were one of the most surprising teams in the entire league. The Wizards win an ugly back and forth game over the Hornets despite another 30 ball from LaMelo, who does seem to be putting it together now, even though the Hornets aren't really as a team. The Knicks dominated the Spurs in Wemby's first ever Madison Square Garden appearance behind 20 plus points from Brunson, Randall, and RJ Barrett, who has been great so far this season, seemingly breaking out maybe a little bit. I say cautiously optimistic. The Rockets, meanwhile, blow out the Lakers by 34 points as they get above 500 for the first time in over 1,000 days. Shout out to the Rockets, playing some great hoops so far. Jalen Green was good in this one. Meanwhile, the Lakers have a lot of things to figure out. They're dealing with a bunch of injuries. Not really their fault in that regard, but even when they've been healthy, I haven't been super impressed. No Anthony Davis in this one. They just kind of rolled over and gave up, it seemed like, a lot of the night. The Timberwolves blow out the Pelicans, meanwhile, by 21 points. They continue to shoot up the standings. Gobert has a 17-point, 21 rebound double-double. The Heat beat the Grizzlies in another very ugly back-and-forth game. Both these teams play some ugly basketball at this point in the year. Unfortunately for the Heat, the bigger news is that Tyler Hero leaves this one with an ankle injury that seems like it'll probably keep him out a while. He said post-game that he heard, I think, some snaps or some noises when it happened. Really unfortunate. Hero's been incredible so far this season. Hope he gets back soon. And finally, the Raptors beat the Mavericks pretty convincingly behind great play from Siakam, 31 points and 15 boards, dominated inside against a Mavericks team that was without Derek Lively, who just makes a world of difference for this team. Also, some great defense and overall play from Scotty Barnes, who continues to look like an all-star caliber player this season. But yeah, with all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. Let me know what your biggest takeaways were from these games, and most in particular, what do you think about the Sixers? Can they go ahead and compete there in the Eastern Conference? Is it just the same old Sixers and I'm a fool for getting reeled in by them again? I'd love to hear y'all's opinions, as well as, of course, your general takeaways from anything in this slate of games or anything that you've seen so far in the season. Love talking hoops with y'all down below in the comments. As I said earlier, please leave a like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate all the support in the channel to start the season. It's completely blown me away. By far the best period this channel has ever had, and it's all thanks to y'all. But yeah, I think this was a longer recap, so I'll go ahead and finally wrap it up. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.